Welcome to Navigating Distress in Times of Innovation. This will constitute an interview with Mel Head and then a discussion with our viewers. The discussion will focus on easing unintentional consequences of technology, featuring this interview of Mel. Mel, before I get into a lot of specifics, let me provide a little bit of a backgrounder here. The world is in turmoil, often appearing to be in a state of distress that touches nearly every aspect of society. As the rules and circumstances around us shift, we must find ways to navigate this turbulence while continuing to drive technological innovation and development. To truly improve our changing world, we need to minimize the possible unintended consequences of these new technological introductions and ensure society benefits from genuine progress. This requires us, someone, somewhere, to critically evaluate our actions, especially when introducing the first iteration of an innovative technology, and avoid pushing forward without fully considering the potential impact. Good luck. If we do not become more discerning, we risk repeating mistakes and missing the opportunity for better outcomes. So that's the introduction, Mel. Show us what you got.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Perry, for giving me the opportunity to speak here today. So welcome to today's webinar on progress and innovation. Today we're going to be discussing the turmoil of unintended consequences of technology. So as the slide says, my name is Mel Head, and I've worked in technology for well over 40 years. And as a disclaimer, I am optimistic about technology, no matter what I may say here today. So bear with me for the next 10 minutes or so, and I'll provide a view to where technology has taken us and possibly where it has not. Let's recognize that technology has made many great contributions to our lives and will continue to see a lot more. Let's also note that some of the changes have not fully delivered on their promises or provided what we had hoped for. We may not understand all technological advancements, but we need to move forward with optimism. We're all learners, but we now need to also become discerners. A discerner is a person who recognizes or perceives things clearly. As I said, we need to become discerners and be very particular on what we actually see in the media and elsewhere. Is there bad weather on the horizon? Well, I doubt, but it isn't really the same everywhere. It would be good if we could anticipate the negative effects of technological advancement, but we often only realize them after the fact. The entire global population cannot realize benefits from technological advancement all at the same time. This is often due to varied economic, geographical, geopolitical concerns, among others. Turmoil in technology is too large a topic to cover in general terms today. So before we look at any of the negative implications of technological progress, let's look at the positive side. Technology has revolutionized our daily lives in numerous ways. In healthcare, we've seen remarkable advancements that have extended lifespans and improved treatment options of various diseases. Education has become more accessible than ever, with online resources and remote learning opportunities, allowing people to develop new skills and for some to work from anywhere in the world. Communication technologies have connected us globally, making it easier to stay in touch with loved ones and collaborate across wide distances. The impact of technology on our economy cannot be overstated. Automation and AI in general have significantly increased productivity across industries, allowing us to do more with less. We've also seen the emergence of entirely new industries and job opportunities that didn't exist just a couple of years ago. Furthermore, technology has facilitated global trade and economic cooperation, creating more interconnected world economy. Technology plays a crucial role in addressing our most pressing environmental challenges. Although considered controversial by some, we are rapidly seeing rapid development in clean energy sources like solar and wind power, which are becoming increasingly cost competitive with fossil fuels. Additionally, innovations in sustainable agriculture and resource management are helping us use our planet resources a lot more efficiently. Along with the good, the digital age brought us new challenges. We're seeing increased rates of social isolation and mental health issues, often linked to excessive screen time and social media use. The ease to spread misinformation and disinformation online has become significant. It is a big issue for society, impacting everything from public health to the democratic processes. Concerns about privacy and data security have grown more of our lives as we've moved online. Technology has driven economic growth, but it has also contributed to economic disparities. Automation is displacing many jobs, particularly in, particularly affecting low-skilled workers. We are also seeing a growing digital divide between technology and in advanced nations and those in developing countries. Furthermore, the concentration of wealth in tech-centric economies is exacerbating income inequality. Despite technology's potential for environmental solutions, it also poses environmental risks. The rapid obsolescence of electronic devices is contributing to a growing e-waste problem. The manufacturing of some high-tech products often requires rare earth elements and other resources, leading to resource depletion and social impact. Energy consumption of data centers and digital infrastructures is a growing concern in the context of climate change. As AI and biotechnology advance, we're facing complex ethical dilemmas. There are concerns about the potential misuse of AI in surveillance and warfare, raising questions about privacy and human rights. In biotechnology, developments in genetic engineering and human enhancements are pushing the boundaries of what it means to be human, raising profound ethical questions. Our increase in reliance on technology has created new vulnerabilities. We're seeing a rise in cybercrime and state-sponsored digital attacks, threatening individuals, businesses, and national security. There's also the potential for critical infrastructure disruptions through cyber warfare, which could have devastating consequences. Global connectivity, while beneficial in many ways, may be leading to cultural homogenization. There are concerns about the loss of cultural diversity and local traditions as global popular cultures become more dominant. We are also seeing the dominance of certain cultural narratives and perspectives, particularly and potentially drowning out minority voices. Long-term exposure to digital technologies may be changing how we think and how we behave. Some studies have suggested changes in attention spans and cognitive processes due to constant digital stimulation. There are also concerns about changes in social behavior and interpersonal skills, particularly among members of the younger generations who have grown up with these technologies. As society becomes increasingly reliant on technology, we face new vulnerabilities. A major technological failure or disruption could have far-reaching consequences in our daily lives and affect the critical infrastructure. There's also concern about the potential loss of traditional skills and knowledge as we become more dependent on technology to perform tasks. We are currently facing several challenges in the governance of technology. Traditional regulatory approaches are struggling to keep pace with rapid advancements, creating governance gaps. The global regulatory landscape is fragmented, with different regions adopting varied approaches. There are concerns about the growing power of large tech companies and their influence on society. Lastly, many technologies are having unforeseen impacts that weren't adequately anticipated or addressed and are slow in their response to correct them. Let's sum it up a little bit. If we continue on our current path, we may face several serious issues. The uneven distribution of technological benefits could widen existing inequalities. Unchecked technological influence on information flows could further erode democratic processes. Divergent regulatory approaches might increase the international tensions and fragment global digital economies. We may face serious ethical dilemmas without robust governance frameworks for emerging technologies. And lastly, rapid technological development without proper regulation could exacerbate environmental challenges. This discussion highlights the urgent need for change in how we approach technology and governance. We need more adaptive and anticipatory regulatory approaches that can keep pace with rapid technological growth and change. Enhanced international cooperation is crucial to create a more coherent global regulatory framework. We must involve diverse stakeholders in shaping technology and technological processes to ensure all perspectives are considered. It is vital to balance innovation with responsible development and use of technologies. We need improved mechanisms for addressing the unintended consequences of technological advancements. Only by addressing these needs can we harness the full potential of technology while mitigating risks. Technology has helped us get as far as we have and will continue to move us forward in ways we cannot easily imagine today. We do not all have to understand the intricacies of modern technology or exactly how it all works, but we do need to monitor how it affects our lives so we can mitigate those potentially less desirable effects that it may have upon us. As I noted earlier, I don't usually look at technology in a dystopian way, but we all need to be aware of and use more critical thinking as the world continues to change around us. I would be amiss if I didn't ask AI for a list of the top 50 technological innovations and products that could have unintentional consequences on society. A quick glance at many of these will show you that many are good, and we've all personally experienced benefit from many of them. But on the other hand, there are the dark sides to some of these as well. We don't have time to go into the details of these, but some of them can conjure up a lot of recent media stories that can add detail to what you're reading. We can live with this. We can make it better. But we all need to become better critical thinkers as we continue to make the world a better place. As society becomes increasingly reliant on technology, we'll all have to continue to face new vulnerabilities. As major technological failures or disruptions happen, and they will, they could have far-reaching consequences on our daily lives and critical infrastructures. There's also a concern about the potential loss of traditional skills and knowledge as we become more dependent on technology to perform those tasks. Society needs all sorts of people, and not only those who work with technology or those who develop it. This is the title, Science is Neither Red Nor Blue. It's from a November 15th, 2024 editorial from science.org by Marcia McNutt. She is the president of the United States National Academy of Sciences in Washington, D.C. She makes a strong message because she, like many, has become very concerned that science has fallen victim to the same political divisiveness that's tearing the seams of the American society. And she says, scientists need to better explain the norms and values of science to reinforce the notion, with the public and their elected representatives, that science at its most basic level is apolitical. There are many more questions, and probably some of them even have answers. How can we anticipate negative consequences from technology? What role does the public play in our decision-making processes? How do we assess the need for innovation in high-risk fields? Do we have any effective regulatory safeguards in place? What's the state of our current regulatory bodies? Is it sufficient? What happens if we do nothing? What can we do now to make things better? So with that, Perry, I'd like to kind of turn it back to you.
Let me throw a couple of points out and let you roam through them. You use the word we a lot. I mean, you may mean government as a representative of the public. You might mean the delegation of the we and the public to institutions. You might, by we, mean us as individuals. I suspect you mean all of us.
I think collectively that's probably true. It's as opposed to naming specific groups.
The regulation of the professions became a fundamental issue when we realized that there was snake oil out there on the market, and government stepped in and said, we'll help regulate the distribution of the knowledge held by professionals by ensuring that they're properly credentialed. And then they would take them through not just tests of their technology or knowledge, but also tests of their ethics. There's an ethics associated with technology, and yet so often we train scientists without giving them a lot of depth in ethics. And then they're called on to be good communicators and to help tell the story about what they have learned in the lab. And then they start to massage it because of their frustrations. You've touched on that as well. But you've entered into the challenge, I guess, that we have opened ourselves up to discuss with this whole series of how do you actually critical think? How do institutions, in fact, earn trust to be credible when so many of them become politicized because someone has a message that they decide to buy or sell or win an election on? This has become really complex and complicated by the fact that no longer is it those on high that are doing all the speaking. You got masses with access to the internet that control and contain large numbers of people that can be mobilized quickly to challenge a view or an idea. We live in this global chaos where technology itself is just one of the many contributors. So I guess my little rant there is a sum up of the point that you're making. But this whole we involves all of us.
It definitely does. And I think, you've brought up a lot of excellent questions there. And in many cases, if you look at just a technological issue that people are talking about, everyone seems to be putting their 2 cents in, whether they really have a sound understanding of it or not. Everyone is, 3 Mile Island, for example, restarting to provide power for artificial intelligence and data centers and so on. A lot of people say, oh no, that's nuclear power. We don't want that. If you really push them into the corner and ask them the questions about it, it's only the ones who really have kind of learned and gone out and done a little bit of research and found out that, yeah, this can provide the power we need. And there are some risks, but we can mitigate all of those risks. I think the big thing is we see something coming out in the media and you look a little bit behind or under the technological covers and you find that there are a few missing gears in the clock.
Yeah.
So it's hard to kind of pull it all together because the social media and everything and the media in general will get a lot of misinformation out before it's caught and corrected.
It may be impossible to pull it together. I mean, the
It may
message,
be.
we need to simply be aware and do the very best that we can to mitigate uncertainty. But I always like the relevance of using humor to make a point. We can talk about nuclear energy and people will walk away. But we could talk about the invention of the wheel. And everybody's gathered around the camp, and somebody has come and said, I have just found something that you can't believe what this thing is capable of doing. Elders looking at him, what a fool he is. But, who could have anticipated the wheel as a tool of a tank, the tool of a wheelbarrow? There's a price to progress. And we're going to have to put up with some of the risks if we really want to make progress, so we need to burn the wheel. And I'm not sure society is ever going to give up the pursuit of knowledge, much less the pursuit of technology in the interest of progress. We just need to be aware of these unintended consequences and be able, when they start to emerge, to be able to more quickly mitigate the problem instead of always anticipating it means building a bureaucracy.
Yep.
Stopping it when something actually begins to happen that's negative is another matter. So thinking this through is one thing, but executing stop or executing institutional power to stop it is another. You want to take me through that? I mean, we're talking about more than just thinking things through. It's more than critical thinking. It's critical stopping.
Well, thinking in general, I think, is, I hate to kind of paint the same color on all of this, but if a new innovation comes out and it's promoted for all the wrong reasons, that it's going to get a lot of people signing up, it's going to get a lot of money, it's going to get power, it's going to get whatever, but it doesn't really do a whole lot. Then, look at just, for example, the social media where it initially started off several years ago when people were able to communicate with one another, and then people found other, I want to maybe not go as far as saying nefarious reasons for using it, but found that they could have gain at someone else's expense with it. And technology is much like that as well. People come down heavy on electric vehicles and that type of thing, but when you really sit back and you try to be pragmatic about it, you say, well, I need to charge these things. I need to I need to have a place where I can build them. I need to build batteries. You look ahead and you say, well, geez, there's a lot of places that fix and can tune up your vehicle and fix the engine and all that type of stuff right now. But bring an EV in there, there's very few of them around right now. So there's a lot of stuff that's kind of gone further ahead too quickly, and it has caused some problems.
But it's not, it is not unusual for someone in a research role to develop a technology that is far beyond what the infrastructure has the capability of sustaining, either from a regulatory perspective or even from a technical. So you bring out a cell phone that nobody really knows how to repair, and you throw it away and you buy a new one instead.
Yep.
Is that good or bad? I mean, you're putting a lot of things in the dump that probably shouldn't be there. Ultimately, the market responds, and someone sees the economic, the opportunity to set up a network of repair shops. So technology sometimes gets ahead of the market, and then it takes a while to catch up. Or investors.
Yeah, it's incremental in a lot of senses. Something has to happen and we have to continue doing something. We can't just stop, but we have to think of which directions we're going.
Well, yeah, I mean, the example that comes almost to everyone's mind is what happened when COVID hit. And pharma jumped into the fray quite appropriately because it had technology, it had knowledge, and it came up with a tool, the RMAs. And it said, we have something that can help you. Others argued you haven't adequately tested it. Others argued, but people are dying. We've got to try something. And now it's after the fact, and the Monday morning quarterbacks have shown up, and we're going to throw maybe the baby out with the bathwater. I mean,
Well,
if you're a politician and you've got to act on behalf of the public, you're going to have to take chances, and chances were taken. Whether they were right or not, we're going to have that argument probably for another 50 years.
in Ray Kurzweil's most recent book, he talks about that specific subject about COVID and vaccines. And there are millions of combinations of things that can be put together, and they know what has to work. But to try them all out is time and money. But when they use AI, they can go through millions of combinations, and which is what they've done. So what it does is it narrows down the field a little bit, and then they turn these more viable, potentially better options over to the researchers who now put them through the paces, as opposed to trying to filter everything.
So we now have a technology has provided us a tool for risk mitigation.
Yeah, and further than that, we can actually simulate people, essentially, to apply these quote solutions or possible solutions to media or to fixing this problem. So they know what has to happen from a chemical point of view, and they make it work out. So the thing is that it's really just shortening the time, and of course shortening the dollars. Of course, artificial intelligence does cost a lot of money as well, but there are many different ways of getting to the solution today than going through the X number of years of testing and so on, and that we had no option to do before.
So this risk mitigation is actually the reduction of uncertainty, the reduction of errors, the reduction of unintended consequences, the saving of money. It all sounds like AI is a blessing. And yet I have here on the wall an article that appeared today that AI could spell the end of intellectual work, what I've referred to as the end of the knowledge economy, because AI shows up and does something that mankind was not able to do before because he couldn't handle that much information. And now we have students that were told, if you want to have a future, you got to become a coder. How many years ago was that? Chatting with one of my advisors this morning, he said it's exactly what he told his kids, is you got to learn coding. And now he reads and hears that AI could spell the end of mundane intellectual work, not just coding, but literally anything and everything that involves intellectual work or knowledge is now at risk. A new technology that can mitigate risk and uncertainty, at the same time throw a lot of people out of work until such time as we figure where alternative work is going to come from. What an amazing journey we are on. I mean, thank God I'm retired. I have never had so much fun intellectually because I'm not having to do this in the interest of making a living or finding my way in a career. I am just having the time of my life. I mean, no wonder I'm 83 looking like I'm 40. Are finding this absolutely fascinating. And there aren't a lot of people in society that can have this much fun and consider it fun without threat. It is such I don't know if this is utopia, but everything is out in the open. Go ahead, Peter.
Thank you, Mel. That was a very interesting presentation. And so one of the things I'd like to suggest is that it's actually more complicated than you've got. Basically, what you've been describing is the political mess that we're in and its consequences to a variety of other things that, including the environment and education and rights and so forth. But the other major thing that's going on right now is, and I would say that what you've described as I'll call it the geopolitical side of things, is one of the polycrises, is one of a set two polycrises. So I divided the world right now into two. There's sort of the governance, political, geopolitical dimension. So that's how the humans interact. And then there's the environmental polycrisis that has been created by humans. Our business as usual model for society, which is consumer oriented, consume stuff. Much of it like fast moving consumer goods. I mean, why do we need these things? I mean, we just produce stuff because there's an opportunity to produce stuff. And so there's a lot of waste. And the waste is a form of pollution. And not only is it the waste, it's also the waste of the materials, because we don't really need a lot of those things. But nonetheless, we create stuffed animals and all kinds of other things that are supposed to amuse us. So I think there's another crisis here, and that polycrisis in the environmental side is climate change is the principal driver. But then there's the environmental consequences of pollution, which is also leading to biodiversity collapse because of diminishing population. Because we have another problem of we need food, we've invented fertilizer, and we spread the fertilizer because we need the food, yet the waste flows into our freshwater systems and is now accumulating in forms of various types of pollutants in our water system, both the rivers, the lakes, and ultimately into the ocean. So, I mean, there's two groups of polycrisis going on at the same time. And we haven't differentiated those before that I've ever seen where they were combined them. I've always seen them separately. So I'd like to, you'll see in my paper, I bring this subject up, but just in terms of thinking about our conversation tonight, I'd like to divide it into these two camps because it's really more complicated than even what you've told us already about.
Those camps, though, are understood from a macro sense. But Ma and Pa from Leduc probably don't spend a lot of time thinking about climate change. What they think about is that they're bored, so they want to buy a new toy, or they think because they're existential, life has to have interesting things. Oh, and that's more interesting than that was, and so they buy different things that and we call this we're making progress. People are being entertained. People are being fed different foods from all over the world. You go into a supermarket today, it's a completely different experience than what I remember going through when I was a kid in Bohax or what today would be Safeway. The progress is interested in reducing people's boredom and entertainment or pursuit of knowledge. They're really not thinking about climate change and pollution.
I agree. Most people aren't. I mean, and most people, including the polluters, aren't even thinking about pollution.
And so they're not doing critical thinking either. They're not asking about consequences. They're enjoying the moment.
Business as usual.
Yeah, they're living in the moment. They go to the
You
supermarket, they buy what they want to buy for that particular moment, that particular appetite, without thinking about the throwing away of the packaging,
right?
or what cows are being raised where, or what grasses are being, what forests are being burned out. Like, we're so damn intellectual, but Mom and Pa from Rimby, they vote. They hardly vote about things of such an existential level. That's the academics that are in blue on the coast, not those in the red in the middle. So I don't disagree with you, Peter, but if we really want to bring about progress as it relates to reducing unintended consequences, we've got to somehow translate this in terms that Mom and Pa from Rimby will understand and engage in. That's probably education. Media isn't feeding them in a way that they buy into how they will modify their behavior and not buy another gas guzzler, but will buy something. They'll ride a bicycle from now on. Go ahead, Yogi. You're muted.
Well, I think what happens to a lot of people is they listen to Peter and to you, and you list a legitimate but daunting list of problems. And I think people just retreat into a cocoon and reach for their TV remote and click the Netflix button and want to be entertained, and they can ignore all of these existential issues because they sure don't have any answers for them.
My point.
And I think we have advanced technologically in many ways. Excuse me, as Mel summarized very well. So I think it's overwhelming for people to understand the relationships among all of these technologies, and they can be very easily sucked in by someone who offers simple solutions, which we as a group would all find ridiculously trivial and unlikely to be successful. But there's a lot of people who are going to just say, oh, okay, that sounds okay, let's do that. And I don't know how we combat that.
When I was with the Alberta government, I touched on this. It's very interesting because I was just thinking about being exposed to such a question. And the question was, at what time does government step in and say to society, enough is enough, stop it, slow it down? And if you look at China, under the early stages of the revolution, where they wanted everybody to be equal, therefore we need to tone down and calm down the role of market forces. Because what we're talking about is the market feeding people's appetites for whatever they want, whenever they want, wherever they want it, feeding the consumer. So under communism in China, people were wearing the same outfits. They minimalized access to consumer markets, but they ultimately gave up. And someone was saying to me recently, gee, communism has such a lure. The trouble is nobody's ever figured out how to implement it without dictatorial and totalitarian measures. So the only way we can really, at least we've really come up with, to contain consumerism in the interest of progress in feeding people's appetites from the bottom is to empower something at the top that says enough is enough. Now, what the US has recently done, whether it was inadvertent or by design, is it has allocated and consolidated power in the hands of a few. And if that power is being used to address some of these issues, then you can be sure that that power will be used to try and contain and constrain some of the unintended consequences of vaccines, if you will, or what's causing obesity. So some of the issues that you've touched on that are a byproduct of technology, obesity is a good one, to contain it, someone has to, from a totalitarian point of view, saying, we're now going to tax carbohydrates. We're going to tax soft drinks. I see Canada recently has now taken the GST off potato chips and soft drinks. So Canada seems to be going in the opposite direction. We don't have enough obesity up here. We got other problems. But this issue that we're wrestling with doesn't seem to me to be being resolved through education and through public media conveyance. It ultimately calls for some containment of the human appetite, which is a totalitarian statement. And I'm not sure how many people really want to go there, although the US has recently said something about enough is enough. Go ahead, Jeff.
I shared in the chat that you know, a lot of the technology can allow for getting rid of pollution as well. So for instance, if you look at your cell phone, it has replaced probably 50 or more items. I shared a graphic in the chat as well. But you know, things like newspapers, televisions, all of these things you can have in your hand now. I've got a chapter in my book dedicated to kickstarting the hydrogen economy. And in it, I look back in history and say, okay, when Henry Ford and Otto and Benz, all these people developed the automobiles, of course, they had no concept of greenhouse gases or global warming. And it wasn't, they probably would have laughed at the idea of it being a concern for them developing the technology. And yet now we know that if we're moving towards a hydrogen economy, hydrogen is also a greenhouse gas. Hydrogen also destroys the ozone layer. So, you know, are we maybe moving from out of the frying pan into the fire? And don't get me wrong, I think a hydrogen economy would be great, but maybe we should work with ammonia instead of hydrogen or something along those lines. But we now have the ability to look at these things and, you know, figure them out before we invest too much.
You're going to need to elaborate a little bit on why you think hydrogen is a greenhouse gas, because if it's burned with a filter, water and nitrogen, not nitrous oxide, are byproducts. What is it about hydrogen that leads you to believe it's a greenhouse gas?
From what I've read, it's actually got a greenhouse gas coefficient that's higher than carbon dioxide.
When it's burned inappropriately, that's the consequence. But if it's burned through a filter, that's not the consequence. So you're right. I mean, not proper management of that technology is going to lead to an unintended consequence. Absolutely. Good point.
Yeah, but I'm also talking about hydrogen has a real, does a really good job of escaping from its containers.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The leakage is a major issue. Absolutely.
The molecule is so small. That's the reason.
Yeah.
And it's always a molecule. Hydrogen doesn't exist anywhere on the planet except perhaps in a lab where it's not an H2.
Right,
yeah,
but
naturally, hydrogen is to combine as two hydrogen atoms together.
like like so many other technological challenges, that's simply an engineer's problem to solve.
But if you look at what hydrogen does to metals, hydrogen embrittlement, and it actually dissociates and gets in between the lattices, and in that form, it's a monoatomic hydrogen.
Some engineer someplace will say, I'm on the verge of solving that problem. Anyway, fascinating. Peter, you've got not the last word, but almost the last word as it relates to your article that's coming out on Sunday, where you take the sum total of much of what we've been discussing and frame it, looking at the drivers of this chaos that we seem to be feeling, this mass of issues that are global and don't seem to be going away. They seem to be getting larger and larger, no matter what WF comes up with, or no matter what the United Nations says. These things continue to exist, and unless some totalitarian measure emerges, or as Mel has touched on, and I'm more of a technocrat, I guess, I don't think human behavior is as readily changed as it is through technology. The technology becomes a tool that human beings can use to try and mitigate risk and uncertainty. And I think AI has come along and may well be a tool to address some of the issues that we're referring to, as long as it doesn't become a tool for misinformation.
As I said, I think one of the main things I've done in my commentary to the paper was to recognize that there's a polycrisis is a good term, and that's being used more and more often now by many circles, both on the science side as well as on the, as in the hard science side, as well as on the social science side. And that it's really two kinds of polycrisis, as I mentioned. So there's the whole, how do we as humans manage the issues that we're facing and getting along with each other, given our politics, religions, and ideologies, etc. And then there's the environmental stresses that we're causing that we're all going to be subject to in varying degrees, depending on where we live on the planet. But we are changing the planet's systems at a rate that is beyond the current carrying capacity of the planet by nature. So if we, it's like getting back to net zero, in effect, if you like, in terms of what we need to do to the environment more generally than just adjusting CO2 in the environment.
Peter,
Yep.
that analysis of we only have a certain capacity as a globe to enable the population to continue to do what it does is what Randall has been arguing about knowledge and the brain's capacity to be able to handle the amount of information that we're being flooded with. So we live in a world of abundance, information and progress. And our problem is we are producing everything in such masses that we have obesity as an issue. We've got a problem of overconsumption, not under. Our problem is as a globe is not poverty. It's not the unavailability, but the overconsumption.
Well, overconsumption in some countries. Obesity is not a big issue in much of the world, actually, except in America and
But
some of the.
they're aspiring to be like us.
Well, there's an aspiration, but I mean, the Chinese. I've lived in China, as some of you know, and you don't see fat Chinese at all, except for the guys who purposely, as the part of the
biggest
religious
problem,
or philosophical background.
the biggest problem China is facing right now is the rate of obesity. They have a huge issue as people are beginning to consume beef and French fries. That has been the truth in the past, but that's not what's facing right now.
Well, one of the things that I can attest to, because I've seen this, I've witnessed it. I lived in Shanghai for 6 years, so I saw this on a pretty regular weekend basis.
Yeah.
The well-to-do in Shanghai, which is many men, because it are families, but the heads of the family is always a man. They take their sons only. They might have a daughter or one more. They generally have one or two kids. They take the son or sons to McDonald's or KFC faithfully every weekend.
Right.
So they are eating the American diet.
My point.
The American diet has created the big tummy.
My point exactly. I mean,
but that's new. That's the last 2 decades.
I agree, but it appears that even within a society that at one point in time,
it's only the young. This is the other important thing about China. It's only the young that are getting big.
Right.
People our age and our children's age, for example, they're not plump. It's only the young, and it's mostly the boys.
So is there any?
And the reason, there's a psychological reason, or let me call it not psychological. It's actually a Chinese philosophical reason among those who are well-to-do. As you know, in days past, women would have these or maybe men times, long fingernails that they never cut. This is to prove they didn't have to work.
Right.
So the boys today are being fattened to show that they're from a wealthy family and shouldn't have to work as hard as the people around them.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure that's the motive.
An unstated public thing.
In New York City, where they're taxing soda, and in the U.S., where they created a czar of obesity,
Yes.
where we're going to use the power of the state and of the consequence of an election to make sure that America is thinner again. Not great, but thinner.
Well, the government stepped in restricting smoking. To answer your question about when does the government say now this is enough, and it took them 2 or 3 decades to actually get it there their handle on it, just like we've been trying to get a handle on the fossil fuel industry.
So maybe we have to
Fossil fuel
accept,
industry is a lot bigger than the smoke business industry.
maybe us right-wingers need to accept the fact that government does play a regulatory role in terms of containing the human appetite to consume and can help us by taxing carbon usage or taxing carbohydrate consumption.
Well, actually, in Canada, it always has started with sort of volunteer. Like back in the late 70s, the government of Canada, Canada was the first country in the world to have a Department of Environment at a national level. And one of the programs they instituted in the 70s was the Conservative Society. The Conservative Society was actually about recycling. And now, I mean, I've got a recycle bin on every block here on the city in Ottawa.
I pointed out that is unique to Canada. When I go down to the US, they do not have recycling as
Just have bigger garbage bins.
Yeah, I commented on
Huge garbage bins.
Yeah, probably because they promote consumption. That's big business. Go ahead, Shirley.
Well, consumption too, because that's what advertising is all about, or
That's
much of
not-
advertising.
Well, that's promotion of the market forces. Go ahead, Shirley.
Yeah, I think as you talked earlier about critical thinking, it's really, really important and gets back to the misinformation. I had an interesting chat with a lady that was involved in recycling, and we think, okay, that's good. But there's a lot of greenwashing and misunderstanding there. And normally, I guess they can take bottles and recycle them 7 times. But if they take the initial bottle and make clothing out of it, which their companies are trying to say, hey, we're doing really good here. Well, it only recycles the once and then it ends up in the landfill. So actually it's not as good as if it goes through the 7 different cycles before it goes to the landfill. So people are just not aware of these kinds of things. There's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of non-information about what is good. And companies promote things, but it's the bottom line. It's all about money.
Well, we've transitioned this discussion away from the unintended consequences of technology to the unintended consequences of consumption and of promoting a market economy that revels and profits from progress associated with feeding the appetites of the consumer. And I
Perhaps
think, go ahead, Peter.
perhaps this might be a topic to explore in our discussion after my presentation.
Absolutely.
Because I raised the issues about what we're talking about here. As the business as usual model, I think, has to change. Otherwise, it's just overproduction, overconsumption. And as I said, the rate of capacity of the planet to absorb all the things we're producing as waste is now not possible.
The reference that I was making earlier to when I was within the government, I've now remember the point I wanted to make, that I was director of privatization and funding reform, and I didn't mean privatization as necessarily giving business the former public services, but to recognize that we were trying to increase the role of the person as a purchaser as opposed to the role of the supplier or of the government in particular. What I saw was the emergence of an acknowledgement that market forces were the better way of containing costs and unintended consequences, that the market itself was a good regulator. But I was concerned that if you take that as an ideology, you can take it too far, because market forces ultimately lead to things like monopolies and things like we're referring to, unintended consequences on the environment and on obesity, et cetera. So how to get the right balance between regulatory forces from the state and the personal behavior modification through education and parenting. And what we've been wrestling is this tension between what's in the public interest and what is driving personal behavior, and the role between businesses and government and personal appetites. It's not just market forces alone or regulatory forces alone, it's these acting in combination to get things right. And they're probably going to be out of balance all the time We're just trying to make an adjustment and using an election every now and then to mitigate the excesses. So I think we're going to have to live in a world of uncertainty. I think technology comes at a rate far faster than ever before, which really challenges the regulator to keep up, AI being a good example. So we're entering into, or we're already into, an environment of global chaos. It's not likely to go away readily, and we need to be careful not to expect that the totalitarian forces will be the right answer. But there are going to be a lot of things attempted in the coming years to try and contain everything from climate change to obesity to pollute. There's a lot going on that is going to create a huge appetite to come up with some utopian solution that typically is going to be either opting for new technology, putting new incentives in, as Jeff has alluded to with financing, or giving government more power, as the US right now is attempting as its attempt to contain migratory changes, vaccines out of untested. We're in a period of chaos.
Well, I agree totally. We're in a period of chaos, and one of the things that I marveled at for decades, I think, is we know an enormous amount of stuff, and we only apply a little bit of it. I
Well, Jeff,
think there's an enormous amount of stuff we know that we could actually take and apply to solve the problems we're talking about.
Peter, we have a help is on its way. We have AI. If we
Well,
know all this,
I
why are we
agree.
not
That's the
using
next
it all?
step. Yes.
And ChatGPT says, I can help you get access to all of what you know on a global scale and give you a solution with an algorithm that may be tilted a little bit to the left or the right. You're going to have to figure that out. But
Yes, but no, I agree. I mean, we're now at a point when you make a prompt in these frontier language models that you are basically tapping all of human knowledge.
right,
It's in there.
right.
You just
It's
have
the
to
one brain.
figure out
The
your
one brain.
prompt to get what you want
Yeah.
and to learn what you want to learn.
So
So
there's
I mean, so that
grounds.
might be AI may be the course to help us achieve that. But it's amazing that all this, for decades, centuries, in fact, we've been gaining knowledge, and we only apply some of it.
Well,
Peter, I think that sweeping statement about all of human knowledge turns out to be not quite correct.
Oh, it's not. I agree. It's all about codified knowledge. It's
is the operative
clearly
word
codified too.
is the operative word quite, meaning we're going to get there, but we're not there yet?
Well, I
I
don't think it's going to get
suspect we
tacit
are.
knowledge.
I
Tacit
mean,
knowledge is going to be something else. Maybe it'll be an AI agents in the future, but it's not. We don't have tacit knowledge in these language models. We have codified knowledge. And
yeah, so
tacit knowledge is why you have the expert and the apprentice. But the expert or the master passes to the apprentice.
But
That's
we're in a lot better position than we were before the learning language model.
in terms of access to knowledge, we absolutely are hugely better off.
Yes.
What I think is missing, or what I can see is missing, is the depth of understanding in various disciplines just isn't there yet because it isn't online. And I'm suspecting that will change in the course of the next few years. That what's in those reference books, in those dusty shelves in the library, still contain useful knowledge and understanding that isn't yet available via the internet.
Okay, well, as a sum up, I want to thank you, Mel. You clearly stirred our thinking. We've come back to a point you made in your wrap up, which was the emergence of AI as a means of mitigating risk and reducing uncertainty. And as such, reducing the probability that we'll opt for totalitarian measures in order to contain the excesses that are leading and creating or generating some of these problems. I look forward to sharing with you Peter's article coming out on Sunday and resuming this discussion as Peter attempts to sum up what we've explored and what we've learned over the course of the last month. So I'm going to call this a day, Randall. We'll have a little after party as we often do, but this was exceptional. There's not a lot of editing, not a lot of coughing and sneezing and distractions in the course of the last hour, but Mel, this was superb. Thank you very, very much for the time you spent to launch this. And thank you, each of you, for the contributions you've made, everybody that was here today.